Café Anyway.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
All right, here we are. We are at Café Anyway, somewhere in podCastro Valley, the last place on earth. Mike Matthews in the land of Ameritopica.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
It's episode 2874, 2874. Welcome to Mike Matthews' little show where we explore stuff that is interesting that might tickle that part of your brain that's not ever used, and that's okay. You don't have to explain because you're busy. You got things going on. All of life is just this big whirling cacophony of
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Funny. Cacophony. We put the funny in cacophony. That's what we do here on my show,
Daily,
which is called
Podcast.
Mike's Daily Podcast. So, Americans are not writing checks anymore. If you're writing a check, you are a stegosaurus. You are an amazing person that is fighting against whatever the wave of future technology of the future is doing. You are saying, no, I like to rip little pieces of paper out of a little book and write everything down. Kudos to you. Well, it's funny, I bring this up because I was trying to find my checkbook the other day because let's just say I have property in another state that if you want to use the modern method of doing transactions, they charge you. So it just actually makes a little bit, it costs a little bit less, a couple bucks less to send them a check instead. And I said, where the heck is my checkbook? And I looked, I tore the house upside down and I finally found it. It took a good hour or so. I broke a sweat. And then tomorrow I have to go over and get my blood work done to see how much fat is in my blood and how many of the bad fats and the bad lipids and all of that I have, Mr. Lipid. Hey, wasn't that Don Knotts?
And here's today's podcast picture.
The podcast picture is not of Mr. Lipid or my trip to get my blood drawn. No, in fact, it is not even of the checkbook that I found. The podcast picture is going to be of something. Let's go back a couple weeks back to a cool trip my lovely lady friend and I took. See it at mikesdailypodcast.com. Oh, and then we almost got a cat today. We have two already. A third cat. This cat was so cute, little kitten. And, you know, they just melt your heart. So we somehow fought that impulse. The late great Basil the Boxer would have said, yeah, bring that cat home. I'll chase that cat out of the home. But hey, someday, maybe the next pet is a dog. We'll see. Late great Basil the Boxer there. Okay, so Americans wrote 3.4 billion checks in 2022. That still seems like a lot. But that was down from nearly 19 billion checks in 1990. Went from 19 billion down to 3.4 billion. I wonder what that is today, 2 years after 2022. Don't know. Okay, that's my job, is to find out how many checks we wrote this year. I guess we won't know until the end of the year. But this is that statistic for you. You're welcome. Saying it with flowers is expensive. Inflation has slowed to 3%, but the cost of plants and flowers surged almost 10% from 2023 to 2024. Wow. Flowers are up more than 40% over the last 4 years. That's why those flowers are so expensive. Yeah. This is why I go to Trader Joe's.
That's legit.
It is. Sometimes, hopefully you live in a state that has Trader Joe's. There's also somehow affiliated with Aldi. I don't know if Aldi actually has flowers, but Trader Joe's has these cut flowers in the front of the shop, in the front of the store. So I'll tend to go there to get something that seems to be better than Safeway or Lucky's. The price of a first-class postage stamp went up for the second time this year recently. It costs you now 73 cents. That was 5 cents more from what it was previously, to send snail mail and send that check in the mail, which I have to do very soon. And Jurassic Park eccentric dinosaur connoisseur. There's a 161 million year old Stegosaurus fossil. And it was a sale that expected to cost $6 million that happened at Sotheby's auction recently. Okay. Did you... okay. All right, so let's just talk about this stuff. I guess it's interesting to note the times in which we live.
I can't believe... What the hell is this place anyway?
Really, what is this place anyway? Café Anyway. Really reminds me of 1968, the year in which I was born. You have a Democratic president who's saying, okay, I'm not going to run. You had Lyndon Johnson. He said no because of the war that was going on, and the Vietnam War, and he saw the protests that were happening, and he couldn't do it. He became president when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And then he served out that term, then served a term on his own. So he said, no, I'm not going to do it. And then Hubert Humphrey, he went and ran and lost to Nixon, who was the Republican presidential candidate. It was Spiro Agnew, who later, he got impeached first, and then later it was Nixon. But... oh, and there was an assassination that happened in 68. That was Robert F. Kennedy, of course, the father of Robert Kennedy Jr. Robert F. Kennedy was killed. And
anyway,
he was a very leading Democratic candidate that year. And so with him gone, it was Hubert Humphrey, who was Lyndon Johnson's vice president. He was trying to run as president. So similar to what's happening now. You got Kamala possibly going to run. Well, this might have all changed by the time you listen to this as we go outside a Cafe Anyway, where we bring you Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in PodCastro Valley, the last place on earth. But I just find it, and so if we look to 1968, we see what happened. The Republicans won. So that very highly likely will happen this year. I still don't understand why right-wing talk show hosts, Republicans, are still freaking out. They're still worried. I'm like, dude, you got this in the bag. What the heck? So what will this country, this world look like with Trump? Now, you talk to your left-wing friends, and they're like, oh, it's all going to blow up, and we're all going to die, and hysteria.
Good morning, Mr. Matthews.
Thank you. Thank you, children. I'm going to be more optimistic, children. Children, it's Salisbury Steak Day. What I'm going to tell you is I'm going to need about $3.50. No, I'm going to tell you that's a reference to some of you might understand that if you watched a lot of Comedy Central back in the 90s. But here is what I'm going to tell you. And I got this from Rob Black. I produce his podcast. He does Rob Black and Your Money, the Rob Black Show podcast. I produce that Monday through Friday. Oh, that just reminded me. I got to take care of something now about it. Thank you for reminding me. Okay, so he is on the radio Monday through Friday on AM 1220 KDOW, and he is on Cron TV talking money and stocks and investing and all the big companies, and he boils it down in a way you can understand. And he does that on Cron TV as well in the 9 o'clock hour, Monday through Thursday. But he said higher inflation expectations for Trump as president, higher yields and expectations of greater deficit spending. Let's see, there is going to be, Europe will likely take a financial hit as Trump promises not to support Ukraine, and thus security costs in NATO nations would go up. Investors are expecting deregulation. No, I'm not ready for deregulation. Well, some deregulation's okay, but I've lived in a state that was completely deregulated, and it was a mess. It was a mess hole. It's the best way to describe it. So a little regulation here and there is helpful. But investors are expecting not to the amount that California has. It's crazy regulation here. Investors are expecting deregulation benefiting oil and big blue chip banks like Citibank and Goldman Sachs. Investors Humana and United Health Group could benefit from less cost pressures coming from a Republican administration. The Russell 2000, it actually gained after Goldman Sachs said a second Trump term could help small caps outperform. And the extension of corporate and personal tax cuts would take place because those happened under Trump. And people were worried if Trump wasn't elected, well, those cuts would end, the tax cuts would end, and now they're going to continue. The dollar is slightly higher on expectations of tougher trade policies. And Trump's inflationary policies, we'll call them inflationary. I don't know if inflammatory is a bit inflammatory to say, but his inflationary policies in terms of stricter immigration, tougher trade ties.
Oh, wow, that's wild.
And increased spending. Wow, that's wild. That could potentially be set to all take place under his reign. So some of the things that some people think that Bitcoin, there'll be more in the short term, investors will be looking to Bitcoin and gold as havens to hedge against political instability in the U.S. So all that possibly will happen. And then Bud Light, this doesn't have anything to do with Trump, or does it? Formerly the top-selling beer in the United States has had a tough year since a boycott upended the industry. It's only getting worse because now they have fallen to third place. Michelob Ultra, also brewed by Anheuser-Busch, leapfrogged Bud Light to become the second best-selling beer at grocery and convenience stores. So Anheuser-Busch still has 2 and 3. And this is, let's see, for the past 4 weeks, ending on July 6th, Bud Light captured 6.5% of beer dollar sales.
Bison Bentleys. Do you know that?
Hey, this is Bison Bentley, and Mike Matthews has a couple of stories that'll make you want to ask yourself, do you know that?
Do you know that? What is number one is Modelo. It maintains its top share at almost 10%. And all of that comes from the fine folks there at CNN, which some of you people listening may think they're not exactly fine folks. But still, Bud Light's further decline shows that a boycott over the brand that started in April of last year over a one-off sponsored Instagram post, a one-time Instagram post featuring transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, that caused lasting damage to the beer's sales. The right-wing talk show host picked that and ran with it like they were on some sort of football game show. The social media post garnered national attention from the right, and Bud Light's response to the controversy caught anger from the left. So they did not help anybody. Let's see. Does it say anything here about Modelo? No. I would actually drink that over the other two, so I can see where that would be. The Ukrainian pipeline shutdown has disrupted Hungary.
Do you have any safe spaces?
Safe spaces?
Yes, where people can go to get away from the colonialist mentality. As long as there's a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy, we'll be fine.
Ukrainians have halted the transit of Russian oil to Hungary. However, Hungarian Foreign Minister Peter Szijjártó said that certain legal complications have arisen and are currently being addressed. Budapest wants Russian oil to bypass Ukraine. Russian oil has stopped flowing through the pipeline via Ukraine. And let's see, but Russian oil is crucial for Hungary's energy security. That comes to us from the fine people at SA News. ESSAnews.com. Okay, look who's here. Hello, Michael Masters, Madame Rootabega. All this was very fascinating. You're like a news guy. Woo! Yes, I am. Hey, do you like roasted squash in the oven with a little bit of oil, olive oil, and seasoning? Yes. Do you like rice, brown rice? Yes. Do you like pressure cookers? No. Well, pressure cookers are awesome for cooking rice. So much faster. I discovered
That's enough. Put down the mic.
Well, don't ban pressure cookers when you're president, please. They are very helpful. And we want you to be healthful and not eat so many burgers. That's our slogan on this podcast. Okay, we're going to wrap it up today. I think is a good place to stop. Don't you? Oh, wait, we didn't say hi to these guys.
Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant.
And this is Bison Bentley.
Mike, we like to go to Treasure Island Day near San Francisco Day.
Yeah, it's on the way to San Francisco. That's right. Got the Oakland Bridge, takes you to Treasure Island, and then you take the Bay Bridge to get to San Francisco. It is a neat area. I have not been there in over 10 years. It did have, I read somewhere, there's a note to self.
Note to self.
In one of the local throwaway papers about how there was radioactive waste that came from some of the big explosions they did in the Bikini Atolls, or whatever they call them out there in the Pacific, decades and decades ago. But yeah, it's an interesting place. I need to go back and visit. They filmed part of the first Ant-Man movie there. And there's a lot of, what do they call that? That kind of architecture that's really cool. The Pan American Fair was out there. I think that's the very cool. Yes, I'm reading a thing they sent me that says artifacts under our stewardship. Our archives house artifacts from every chapter in Treasure Island's relatively short yet diverse history, amassed and maintained since the museum was founded in 1976. The number and quality of donations have increased recently. Their construction of Treasure Island, the Golden Gate Bridge, and the Oakland Bay Bridge is what is featured in their collection. I think that's also in that museum is where they filmed the Ant-Man movie. Oh, having some Modelo right now. It's the unalcoholic kind. It's the Modelo root beer. Did they make that? Okay, that's it for the show. That's it. I'm going to put down the mic. If you'd like to call in and comment about anything we covered today, here's the number.
Café Anyway hotline. Area code 510-228-4640.
Try to gang me. No.
Don't try to dang me, is what I'm saying. But you can call that number and laugh like this guy.
Oh my God, man. Jeez.
What? Okay. And with more on everything to do with Mike's Daily Podcast, we go to the mainframe and hear from A-Frame. Thanks for watching on the Facebook Live. And thanks for listening, because this basically is a podcast, so it's mostly a listen thing. So thank you for listening. You're the best. Art Deco.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com.
Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com.
See you tomorrow. Bye.